Good day. I'm Dr. Johnny Pierce, but you can just call me Johnny. And this will be the very beginning of something I hope is really informative and helpful to you. Today, I'm introducing Actually Well. Actually Well is going to be a podcast that I do largely by myself, but I will have people join me from time to time. And in the course of the podcast, my hope is to talk about wellness, not as a destination, but as a starting point, thinking about how things can be well, whether that's a particular experience, that's a general topic, whatever the case may be. What I'm aiming for is that you, as the person who's consuming this, will be able to maybe think differently about some of your experiences, reflect on things, and maybe see it through a different lens. And as you go forward, see things from multiple points of view that, okay, I might not like this thing, or this thing may not be the way I want it to be, but it is here. And if it's something that I can change, what does wellness look like? If it's something I have to cope with, what does wellness look like? So rather than making pathology the focus or concentrating on this diagnosis or that diagnosis, I want to touch on the topic of wellness across the spectrum of life. And I hope that will be something that you find to be valuable to you. I hope that's something that you return to on a regular basis. I'm going to try to produce episodes at a rate that's reasonable for both my schedule and your demand. But welcome to Actually Well. So naturally, episode 1 is going to be about wellness. It's a broad topic. It can encompass every aspect of life. You can talk about relationships. You can talk about career. You can talk about academics, sports, anything you can think of. There's wellness to be found there. And what our world seems to be focused on is what's wrong there. So when we talk about things like relationships, you hear about the struggles people are having in the dating pool and what people expect from one another and what's reasonable and what's not, what's traditional, what's modern. It gets complicated. Even in people committing to one another, naturally, we have various ways that people commit, and people have opinions about how people decide to commit. I don't know if there's necessarily a way that people are supposed to do any given thing per se, especially around their decisions for their lives. I think in the case of something like commitment, it's up to the people who decide to commit to one another, what that relationship is going to look like and how many people get to be in that relationship. But of course, as my mom would say, opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. So there's this need or this felt need to dictate to others how they should be. And from a wellness perspective, that doesn't make a ton of sense. When I'm sitting with clients or I'm talking with them over the phone to set up their first appointment, I'm making it clear to them, I cannot prescribe wellness. I do not have a one size fits all. This is what wellness is. In fact, anybody that would say that they do is largely either undercutting what wellness can be for the person that they're speaking with or overestimating their knowledge on the subject, because I may know what wellness looks like for me. I will tell you, I'm still figuring that out every single day. But how can I possibly know what wellness looks like for you independently of forming a bond with you, coming to know you, learn about your history, learn about your goals? So while you're consuming this podcast, please consider yourself in the process. Whatever I'm saying from the perspective of these are ideas. This is not Bible. As a person of faith, I happen to be Christian, and I also have an appreciation for Buddhism. I use that comparison very often. Jesus said very clearly, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No man gets to the Father but through me. So Jesus was the path. But Buddhism was very different. And I think now that it's being practiced as a faith, this may have gotten lost, but Buddha himself did not see himself as a deity. He talked about this a number of times. And there was once some gathering where someone asked him about the afterlife and why he hadn't spoken on it. And he said, I never said I would. His plight was to figure out why it was that we suffered. And his thought was, I found a way to understand this and to deal with this. But if my way doesn't work for you, go find your own. He saw himself as expert on his own knowledge and experience, not on all things. So I don't necessarily believe I am either figure. Definitely not dashing enough to be Christ, and definitely not quite bald enough to be Buddha. But in both cases, I do believe that there's wisdom, and we can share this wisdom. We can come to find our own personal wisdom and we can give it out to others, not as some directive, but as, hey, this is just another thought, another idea. And that's what I plan to share with you. So, since it is such a broad topic, where would I start? Well, I said I want to start with wellness and not have it be the destination. I think very often, from a problem-centered, deficit model that we often go with, there's gap. There's this constant gap. You wake up in the morning, and at the beginning of the day, you immediately feel like you're chasing the day. And why am I chasing the day? Because I'm behind. I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and it's got to get done pronto. And if it doesn't get done pronto, then my personal value goes down, whether it's how people feel about me in my workplace, or in a classroom, or in a relationship, or it's the way I feel about me, because I've hinged my value onto me doing things, what I produce, or something along those lines. And I think that a lot of the stuff that I see in my field that is out there these days plays on that. My field has gotten quite skilled at getting people to see themselves as flawed, problematic, broken, things of that nature. This is all jargon that I very much, I can't get with it. You can have a broken bone, but I don't think you're broken as a person. And even if an experience goes very poorly for you, you don't handle it the way you want to, you don't bounce back from it as quickly as you'd like to, that's fine. Are you still here? Because if you're still here, then we still got options. And taking that perspective, taking that approach, whether it's in the therapy that I do directly with clients, when I do presentations, or whatever it might be, I'm going with the concept of we got to work from here, because that's the only option we seem to have. What's happened has happened, and we can reflect on it, and we can try to understand it, appreciate it. I definitely want to do that. But we got to always remember that the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield. We can look back, but we can't go forward exclusively looking back. And life demands movement. So we kind of have to move forward. The clock seems to go in one direction and one direction only. So time is steady pushing us toward the next thing. And it's difficult to stop and heal, but you may have to learn how to heal on the fly. And you may have to set time aside for particular types of healing. But that's not necessarily the message that I see when I look on social media. And I follow quite a bit of content creators that are in my field. I follow people who are not in my field, who create content for my field. I'm trying to keep an eye out for whatever is out there so that I can be in the know. One of the things I look forward to doing as a part of this pod is reaction videos, because I see some stuff and I bookmark it. And I think to myself, I can't wait to share my thoughts on this at a later time. So that would be something you can look forward to over the course of our time together. But even when I do that, even when I share my thoughts on something, understand I don't see myself as some kind of authority. I've seen people market themselves as experts, experts on this and that and the other thing. I think it's beautiful. If you feel that competent, that's great. I think I'm going to be a forever learner. I am not the knower. I'm the forever learner. So as a result, I can share what I've learned, but I would not necessarily say, this is what I know. I'm getting to know myself every day. I happen to be a father of two, and I'm very proud of being a father of two. I've got two girls. I'm a girl dad times two. What you see behind me is a collection of things that I've been able to have over the years, whether it be related to family, faith, accomplishments, or just games we like to play. And all of it is symbolic and representative of the life that I'm living. And what I want to promote and encourage within your life is that you live. And when you live, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have things not go the way you want them to go. You're going to have to deal with difficult situations. None of this is some type of barrier to wellness. Typically, it's how we respond to things that makes the barriers to wellness. Mental health conditions are typically a response to being in an environment over a extended period of time that's not necessarily conducive to you being well. The fact that we see the mental health condition rates that we see across the country more and more each year, the fact that things like YouTube, social media, the things that we use to get information out sometimes, these very things can also be sources of distress. All of this is a testament to how much our environment is impacting our mental health. Now, that's not to say that we're just victims of the circumstance, not even a little bit. No, we do choose to consume certain things over others. If you spend hours on end watching the latest news reports, I can imagine it's going to have some consequences for you. Or if you only consume comedy, that's going to have consequences for you. You might be out of touch with what's going on in the world around you, but you'll have a good time in the process. They say ignorance is bliss after all, right? So when I think about wellness, I think about it from the perspective of it's a confluence of events that we can sometimes shape, and sometimes we have to just kind of react to. And if we get really skilled at it, we can eventually respond to the world around us and how we want to function in it. Skills are going to be a big part of the conversation. I think about us as learners. We are taught things through actual modeling. So maybe our parents, maybe our educators in our life, maybe mentors, maybe friends, but we look upon others to figure out how to do things. I think we also get messages. We get messages directly. So maybe your parents had values, maybe your family had values that they passed down through generations. Culturally, we definitely have messages to get passed down through generations with our good friend, the media, social media, and other platforms where information is disseminated. We get things from the before. And we have ourselves constantly creating a new what's going to be later. Where we're coming up with things, we're coming up with ideas. It's not just a invention here or there, but even little sayings and things that people do to connect with one another. As a girl dad, my oldest happens to be in middle school, and of course the 6-7 thing is going on, and I had to look into like what in the world is this, because this girl's saying 6-7 every chance she gets and doing this goofy little face. But like that didn't exist when I was in middle school. We had no 6-7. I don't even remember what our thing would have been. But trying to see things through the lens of skills, it helps when we see something that we're not doing well. So again, going back to the process of if we start with a deficit, then there's always this gap. I would rather start with this is where we are, and however you got to be here. There may have been things that you wish didn't happen, but you're here now. Where do you want to go from here? And it's worth your time to take a look back and try to understand how you got here, whether that's looking back at who your parents were and looking at them as the full rich people that they are and not just the titles of mom and dad. Um, Looking back at your family's history, where's my family originally from? I can trace my roots back to Meridian, Mississippi on my mother's side, where both my grandmother and my grandfather came from there. Obviously, I'm black. So there's the belief that, of course, I came from Africa at some point in time. I don't know what part. I haven't done the 23andMe and all those good things. I don't necessarily want to just hand over my genetic material to anybody. So I don't know exactly where my roots trace back further than that, but Meridian's good enough for me. The fact that my ancestors were slaves and the fact that my grandmother, as recently as her lifetime, she was born in 1924, she's paid a nickel to wash laundry for white people and called the hard R. Like that happened. And that's a part of my family history. And it just, for me, it allows for appreciating the sacrifices that were made to get me here in the first place. The fact that my family made it from there to Detroit, Michigan, where I was born, where my mother was born. The fact that I went home to Detroit, Michigan in 2014 with this degree right here and showed it to my grandmother, who had raised me to believe that education wouldn't live in slavery. Again, she taught me this. I showed her the degree and said, I got all the education that they could give me. And that comes as a watershed moment for me because I didn't fight that history. I didn't fight that legacy. I didn't see it as some kind of crime or some kind of stain on me. It's something that happened before I got here that in time I would have to overcome. And if we look at our lives and the things like that in that way, then it actually empowers and emboldens us, because instead of that gap being there, it becomes this thing that this is where I start. And since it's where I start, there's no telling where I can go. But if I see myself as being limited by that starting point, or I see myself as being victimized by the fact that I happen to be born black or something along those lines, that actually puts a capacity on what later looks like. Because there's no way from a deficit model I should have been able to be born into a single parent home, have an absent father, have that father die when I was 15, and prior to that, sell drugs and be in my life sporadically. I call him a peekaboo dad. Like, none of that history predicts that I'd be the first in my mom's side of the family to finish a college program with a degree and then to go on to get a master's and a doctorate. None of that stuff predicted that. Those were choices I had to make. And I'm so thankful I had the people around me, the village around me, to encourage me to go about doing it. Even if their resources were limited, they saw my vision, they encouraged it. And that was wellness. That's just what it looks like. That simple act of having a vision and deciding that I'm going to take whatever actions I can to accomplish that. That's a part of wellness. So skills are essential to that: decision making, problem solving, conflict resolution, communication. I can go on and on. Listening is a major skill that we have to develop in order to be well. Because if we want to listen just to hear whatever somebody's saying, we may miss a lot of information about how they feel, where they're coming from, what is their intention. We miss a lot of that because sometimes we can listen with emotional ears and hear what we want to hear or hear what we believe we deserve. So instead of playing into those things, and instead of trying to, chase after something that you're supposed to have out in front of you, you could also start here, decide where you want to go. Yes, that will act as a motivator. But remember, motivation follows, it doesn't lead. And then take the steps you can, control what you can control to get where you want to go. And when you run into obstacles, don't see them as inherently bad or good. They are. Receiving things neutrally is a skill, and it's something that I definitely plan on exploring over the course of our time together, because it's not something that I think we've been taught. I think that most of us have witnessed people respond poorly or well to stuff, and that conversation about how they do that often just doesn't happen. But it is something that can be unpacked, looked at, understood, and then practiced. I want to shout out a few people because, yeah, I'm that old guy that does shout outs. But I have a mentor. His name is Carl Sever. And Carl Sever is this amazing person. The first time I met him, I immediately noticed his kindness. And I thought to myself, I want to be kind like Carl, because I don't believe that I'm inherently kind. I've had to learn how to be kind. But I chose to learn to be kind. And I learned from Carl. One of the kindness that Carl paid me is that I left Pennsylvania Counseling Services where I met him. I'd been there about 8 years. I came down here to Virginia where I practice now, and he stayed in touch with me. He didn't have to do that. He really didn't have any reason to do that. He had plenty of people in Pennsylvania that he's connected to that look up to him, that he's responsible for in some way, but he kept in touch with me. And after some time of us staying in touch, one of the things he did that was incredibly kind was he offered to be available to talk to me on the phone, to talk about ideas that I had about how to do things related to psychology that weren't clinical. This podcast is alive now, due in part to Carl. So thank you, Carl, for that. Really appreciate you. And I've had others look out for me along the way. But I also learned how to identify people who would be helpful in helping me build skills. I hope you can do the same if you haven't already. And maybe that will be one of the podcast topics that we have at some point in time. Something else that I fully intend on touching on, even though it's not necessarily a field I practice in, is physical health and wellness. I think that there's no distinction between body, soul, and mind. I think we make that distinction because it's convenient for us to have conversations. It would be like, breaking apart the leg. You can talk about the hip, you can talk about the ankle, you can talk about the thigh, and so on. But ultimately, the whole thing is connected and it works together. So being able to talk about physical health things that people can do to improve their wellness, whether it's the fact that if you wake up and you make a habit of taking a walk within an hour of being awake, it's better for your health. What kind of foods we eat, how do we nourish ourselves, practices around winding down and getting proper rest in the form of sleep, of course, making sure entertainment's a part of your life. It's not something that's just a luxury. It's actually a necessity. These things may not always seem directly connected to psychology, which is what I do have knowledge based on my degrees, but there's no real distinction. If you eat poorly, if you don't have physical fitness in your life, if you don't have some kind of practice of stretching, you don't have, mindfulness around when you get rest, how you get rest, how deep is your rest. If you don't take care of the body, then it's very difficult for the mind to function well. And I would go as far as saying taking care of the soul. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I happen to be Christian, but I do not profess to know that that is the way for all people. It's worked out pretty well for me. I was raised in a church. My mother, my grandmother, I imagine my great grandmother on my mother's side was also a Christian woman. And I highlight the matriarchs because unfortunately I didn't get to meet the guys. My grandfather passed away before my mom was a teenager, so I never got to meet him. My father's side, like I said, he was in and out of my life, so I only knew him so well, and I never met his father because I believe he passed away at some point before I was born. So I've really only been exposed to the ladies in my family, and they were strong, very strong, and they remain strong. And I appreciate them with all my heart. And that's good for my soul to have those connections. And it's not just a psychology thing. Like it really lifts my spirits when I communicate with them, when I can reconnect with them. Now I don't go home as often as they might want me to, but I see them and I talk with them as often as I can. That said, though, if you've never been someone who was spiritual, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be. You don't have to fit into a box. But thinking about how do I feel connected beyond the here and now? Because time has existed. So although it ticks in one direction as far as we know, um, there's this before, there is this history. And that could be that, you know, your family never practiced any kind of religion, but there were these different kind of routines or rites of passage that you guys had. There's holiday traditions. There's something that you're doing that links one generation to the next that calls back. You know, maybe there's that photo album that captures everybody, and you get to hear the stories. All of that, I believe, goes beyond the psychology, goes beyond the physical, goes into the spiritual. You may be somebody who believes the universe tells you things, or you follow astrology or something along those lines. Hey, at some point in time, I may have somebody come on this thing to be able to talk about that in depth. I know I'm a Capricorn. I like being a Capricorn. I also know I was born in the year of the ox. I'm a wood ox, according to the Chinese zodiac. But that's about as deep as my knowledge on those matters go. And that's about as much as my curiosity has taken me into it. But whatever curiosities you might have, I'd love to hear more about it because I do want this to be an exchange. I am not the knower. I'm a forever learner. So in the comments section, I love for people to bring up things that they want to hear talked about or that they think about and see what I can do with that, because I may be able to look into it, find somebody who knows more about it than I do, because there's constantly people out there who know more about things than me, and then maybe have them be a part of a conversation around wellness concerning that. Because again, I think wellness can be found anywhere. So I hope that this first episode, which is more of an extended introduction to what I hope this podcast can become, it's encouraged you to come back again. If you did like the video, please actually like it. It's a thing. If you are listening on one of the platforms that most people listen to podcasts on, such as Spotify or what's the other one? Apple Music. I feel like they're all over the place. So all of the platforms, we're going to do our best to get this across every platform. Obviously, the video will be up on YouTube. But like, subscribe, share, comment. I have some things already recorded that will follow this, which obviously they were recorded beforehand. But I had this stuff in mind in a certain way that I wanted to lay it out. As I said about the episodes, I'm not entirely sure how frequently I'll be able to record because I am going to be that bold person who uses natural light. I've got this amazing window off to my left that just showers beautiful natural light into my apartment. And I do not want to do the ring thing. That light ring, I'm passing on it. I'm saying it now. So sometimes I might record and it might be a little dimmer, and some of that might be because of the tone of the topic for the day. But for the most part, I am going to be relying on the sky to light my way. And a good friend of mine will be working with me to do the editing. Shout him out, Drew Hurt. You the man. He's my celebrity friend. If you know, you know. If you don't, you'll find out. Just look him up. He's great. But that's what Actually Well is going to be. I hope that you enjoy this. I hope that you'll enjoy what I have to come. And please, be well. Look at the queen in all her glory. Got the beautiful flowers in the background. It ain't even as nice as her dress. Go ahead and give me a smile, grandma.